of course, as we've hyped this up for a little bit because I didn't think this could possibly happen, but yes, we made it happen. And tonight, please, everybody, welcome to the show, the writer of the new Netflix film Rim of the World, as well as some other projects you might have heard of, like Andromeda, The Flash, X-Men First Class, and Thor, Zack Stentz. Zack, welcome to the show, man, and thank you for being here.
Oh, it's so my pleasure. It's great to be here.
Yes, and yeah, as I mentioned up top, that you and I do have a very common connection, which is Robert Burnett, who, if I recall correctly, you wrote your first feature on a film he produced, Agent Cody Banks. Is that correct?
Rob indeed was a producer on Agent Cody Banks, which had the most bizarre list of producers in cinema history. Other producers on Agent Cody Banks include Jason Alexander and Madonna.
Wow.
Wow. What?
Go
That
look at the poster.
okay, and I feel like I should know because I saw that movie 3 times in theaters. Hashtag no shame, but you know, and it's really great that you're here because you're here talking about Rim of the World, the new film on Netflix, and I want to just start this off by simply asking, so were you approached by Netflix to do this, or did you have to sort of shop it around on the market, and were they the ones who picked it up?
Um, Rim of the World was actually an original script that I had the idea for. I mean, I had been kicking around for years the idea of doing an Amblin style kids adventure movie, only brought into the present day instead of doing it as an 80s period piece. And then in early 2016, I kind of came up with the idea of kids at summer camp with an alien invasion, and sat down and wrote the script and was pretty happy about it. And my agents and my manager were sending it out to people, and there was some interest from a number of different places. And then I did that very 2016, 2017, where we are now in the film industry choice of, do you go with the studio route or do you go the Netflix route? And I ended up choosing to go the Netflix route mainly because I knew the woman Mary Viola who runs McGee's production company, and she really liked this script as something that McGee could direct after The Babysitter, and thought that Netflix would say yes to. So I wanted a movie that actually got produced and in front of people's eyeballs, so I rolled the dice on that, and here we are with a movie that actually Netflix hasn't released the numbers publicly, but did incredibly well this last week.
That's awesome, man, and congratulations on the success of it so far. Because I've been watching. I watch Netflix very regularly, and I've been seeing it, front and center. Each time I've been clicking on it the last week. So that just clearly indicated that this thing has caught on, and that's very impressive. So when you're making it, talk to me for a little bit about the process of the collaboration with McGee. Was it more collaborative, or was it more so him taking the reins from your baby?
When you do a feature film, it's very different from TV. TV is a writer-driven medium. When you're doing a movie, for better or for worse, it's a director-driven medium. Even if you are the person who came up with the script and did it soup to nuts, once a director comes on, in all likelihood, you are making the director's film. McGee had a vision for this film, and it had a lot of similarities with my vision, but it was also McGee doing his own thing. He and a very talented young writer he works with named Jimmy Warden actually did their own pass on the script. They had an American Vandal writer named Dan Lagana do a pass on the script that was mainly just a dialogue thing. And then but the flip side of that was McGee was also incredibly collaborative and incredibly generous about wanting the person who originated the movie to be part of the process. So he had me on set every day, and I was doing rewrites and talking to him about intent of different scenes. And and was part of the process all the way through, even through editing and post production. So it was a collaboration, and once he was on board, it was a collaboration where McG was very much in the driver's seat. But I felt like, certainly more than any other feature I've been associated with, a bigger percentage of my vision got to the screen than has ever happened before.
Well, that's awesome. And so for everybody who maybe doesn't have Netflix or just hasn't gotten around to it yet, what would you say is the log line to really hook people into why they should really go check this movie out?
The elevator pitch version is, that stupid high concept Hollywood thing is, it's Goonies meets Independence Day. Or if you're a more sensitive person, it is Stand By Me with Aliens. It is four kids.
That's interesting.
Four kids. It's summer camp in the San Bernardino Mountains. When an alien attack happens and the kids find themselves in possession of the key to stopping the aliens, but only if they can get it 70 miles through the war zone of Los Angeles to JPL, and they go through many adventures along the way. They learn about each other, they learn about themselves, and that they're not the people who they thought they were at the beginning, and they become the heroes they never thought they could be by the end.
And it 100% plays out that way, because I instantly found myself really liking both Alex and Gabriel especially. And it was a combination of, obviously the performances, because I'm blanking on the actors' names right now at the moment, but
Jack Thor and Alessio Scalzato in those two cases.
And Jack and Alessio both brought your words and brought just the story that you had crafted, and as well as McG and I'm blanking on the other person who did the pass.
Jimmy.
Okay, yes, but it was so enthralling just watching this little story, because of course I'm a huge Stranger Things fan, because oddly enough I love tribute to that era of nostalgia, even if some of the films from that nostalgia in my opinion don't really hold up as well. Like, sorry E.T. fans, it just doesn't work for me anymore. But what I will say is but when I'm watching why everyone loves those stories as much as they do, it really shows in the stories that you guys are crafting. And particularly, as you mentioned, you mentioned Stand By Me as part of a big influence, but what were some of the influences for some of the characters specifically?
With the characters specifically, I mean, Alex is this weird combination of like me at that age and some other people I know, and character from a YA novel that I wrote a few years back. Although I didn't, unlike Alex, I did not lose my father at a young age, but I had some of the same issues with fear that Alex has. And Alessio was very much Alessio's character Gabriel was very much in the wheelhouse of River Phoenix and Stand By Me, the kind of sensitive tough kid from a troubled background with an incredibly pure heart. That was probably the biggest influence on that character. It's funny. McG actually had a look board up on his wall of like kind of references for the different kids, he had River Phoenix, young River Phoenix and young Leonardo DiCaprio from Gilbert Grape for This Boy's Life for Gabriel, and then he had Margot Tenenbaum from the Royal Tenenbaums for Zen Zen.
And I gotta say, she was. I'm gonna just flat out say it. She was probably my favorite actual character in the movie, and like. And what shocked me at first was I was expecting her to actually stay silent throughout the entire film and just be the silent badass who had everything under control. But then you actually took that trope and completely flipped it on its head. what was that intentional, or was that just something that happened organically?
That was absolutely intentional. And the funny thing is, I know I've seen some of the feedback on the internet, and I know like some people, especially who only saw like the first act of the movie, got kind of angry at like the characters seeming like they were stereotypes. And it's like, oh, look, here's the silent Asian girl. And it's like, yes, we start her that way to make the audience think that that's what they're going to get with her. And then we take a left turn with it. Darius is the loudmouth bully, and then by the end of it, you realize that he's a completely different character than you thought he was going to be.
Character arc.
Exactly, and
evolution.
And it's one of those things where you're watching and you just are picturing yourself which one of those characters you would personally be. Like, for example, in this group of friends right here, it's kind of hard to tell between the four of us who would, be whom. But in your case, Zach, were you always was Alex always meant to be sort of your personal avatar, or were you trying to put a little bit of yourself in some of the other characters as well?
I mean, when you're a writer, you're always in all of the characters because they're all coming from. Sorry, I'm setting the oven at the same time as I'm talking to you. There we go. Because you're in all of you are in all of the characters. Alex is the one that's closest to me, but there are pieces of me in all of them. So I think it's too reductive to say that one of the characters is supposed to be an avatar for me. I like to, at the end of the day, Alex is not Zach. Alex is Alex. If that makes sense.
No, it actually makes a lot of sense. I myself am a amateur writer at best, but my main character is very much an avatar with a lot of my personality, but I also had to create a lot of things to just sort of create that separation between writer and character. And obviously, like that showed where I'm not watching an actor play any of these kids. I'm just watching these characters. And you know what? And if I may ask for just a little bit of advice, real quick.
Of course.
How do you come across? How do you make that happen with ease, as far as making sure that your characters don't come across as just cutouts, essentially, like adding personality?
You have to let the characters surprise you. You have to you start putting yourself in the place of this other character and thinking the way that they think and imagining what their voice sounds like, and then let them tell you about themselves. I know this sounds kind of weird and airy-fairy, but when you live with the characters for a while, they really do start talking to you and start telling you things about themselves that maybe you didn't think that they were going to be. If your character is just there to advance the plot and just there to serve a plot function, then they are a cutout. They're not a real character. Like I'll give an example, like Darius, for example. He evolved over the course of it, both when we cast Benji and just from thinking about him. Originally he was much more of the, he started as the bully, the rich kid bully, the way that he does, but it was much more his issue was that he had a withholding dad who never kind of showed love or affection. And it was from thinking about him and talking to McGee, honestly, that we kind of came up with the idea of, what if this is a rich kid who is fronting to everyone because the deep, dark secret that he's hiding is that it's all about to be taken away. And that really, I think if people would watch the movie all the way through and get to that revelation, which comes, spoiler, about 2/3 of the way through, you then kind of rewind and see all of his interactions earlier in an entirely different light because you realize that there's the secret behind them.
And it also comes through in a lot of the dialogue that you would put down, because first thing you guys will notice, for those who still have yet to watch it, you'll hear that there are a lot of really interesting references to a lot of different crazy things. And I know that I tweeted this out last night because I swear I missed this on my first watch. But like for example, Darius brings up Lithuanian milkshakes, and I'm like, what is that a real thing? And then I'm like, oh yeah.
It's one of those like I didn't come up with that line. I think that
Fair
was
enough.
McGee and Jimmy, but it was one of those lines that was like let's suggest something really filthy, but that doesn't actually have a meaning, but like your mind will come up with something horrifying for it, and that was like I will give McGee and Jimmy full credit. They really like they kind of I'm kind of a prude, frankly, and I don't think I could have gone to some of the kind of edgier places that they ended up taking the script. And then we got all these great comic actors, especially as Benji and the camp counselors, and they went even further. There are cuts of this movie that are like a hard R for language alone. They got dialed back in editing to I'd say more of a cheerfully vulgar PG-13.
And I'm not gonna lie, I'd be curious to like just see what those look like as sort of like an alternate cut, but I'm actually glad that it stayed where it was just a perfect blend of, yes, clearly a little bit vulgar, but still could still sneak by the censors almost in like an Animaniacs kind of way. And
yeah, and everyone forgets, like everyone's like oh, it's so much more vulgar than the Amblin films. And I'm like, go back and watch the Amblin films, and like Ellie's yelling penis breath at his brother. And Goonies spend 2 minutes with like gluing the penis back onto a miniature statue of Michelangelo's David. So, like they go for it in the Amblin movies.
Or Chunk literally just says shit in his opening scene. Like everybody forgets that.
Well, yeah, that's almost his first line. Don't they put his hand in a they put his hand in a blender at one point too?
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Yeah, freaking, like the Fratellis aren't playing.
No, and that was the thing. Like that's what I really appreciate about Run the World, is that it did bring back that sort of that harsh reality that a lot of people try to overlook with a lot of that sort of Amblin era filmmaking. Which, yeah, it's for kids and it's fun adventures, but there's still a lot of actually darker stuff going on, and I appreciate seeing that in the movie.
Well, it's taking kids' inner lives seriously, and kids have huge, dark inner lives, and they're thinking about things like death, and they're thinking about things, they're not doing anything about it. I know some people were very uncomfortable with how far things were pushed sexually in it, and it's like, yeah, they've got, like there's interest and they're talking about it, but if you actually look at what's happening, it's really very chaste. But that's where kids, these are 13, 14-year-olds. That's
and plus
where
they're
at.
teenagers. They're just going through all these emotions, so it makes perfect sense.
That was what we were going for, I hope. And interestingly, full disclosure here. If you go to Rotten Tomatoes, our critics' reviews are, shall we say, mixed. However, our audience reviews are freaking great. It is interesting that there's a real bifurcation between kind of who's getting it and who isn't. But by and large, audiences are getting it, and I'm seeing like kids and teenagers are making memes already and shipping and writing fan fiction, and it's like, yeah, okay,
good Lord,
we found
shipping.
the audience. The audience we were going for, we were doing this for, got what we were after.
And I'll admit, I'm just as guilty when it comes to the shipping thing, just because like that's my thing. When I see something I like and I see two characters who I think could have a relationship together in the future, whatever their age is, hey, why not? See what happens. And
I love, by the way, very late in the game, we added those still photos over the end credits. Because like we always wanted a coda, we weren't sure what it was going to be. I think it was McGee's idea. Netflix was saying we want the audience to know that like the kids are, after the movie is over, that the kids and their families are okay. So they did all kinds of great photoshops of the kids in all those situations. There were a couple that we weren't able to get cleared at the end. There was one of them giving a TED talk, and then another one of them sitting courtside with Jay-Z and Beyonce that we weren't able to clear. But those were really fun. But I mentioned that because there's a great shot of like Alex and Zen Zen at the dance, and they're like a foot apart from each other, which is so that age.
It is very much that age. And it's that relatability that I think, guys, I can't seriously, like I know it seems like I'm kissing his ass, but I'm not. Like I genuinely enjoyed this flick. So if you have a Netflix account, please go check it out. But before we let you go, I did promise the guys that they could each ask you a question about something that was on their minds. And I want to take advantage of like the last 10 minutes we got to make that happen. So Nico, I'll actually throw it to you first if you'd like.
Okay, so one of your credits is you were a writer. I don't know if you still are, but you have written for The Flash on the CW. And at the end of season 1, they teased that Flash is eventually going to disappear when they get to the big Crisis on Infinite Earths event. That Crisis event is happening towards the end of this year, start of next year. And first off, I want to know if did you work on any of that at all? And is there anything inside info you can give us on the Crisis event?
I can't give you any story details. I do know that, even though he's largely stepped back from his supervisory roles, I do know Mark Guggenheim is coming back to help with the Crisis episodes, and that you know how every fall they do the big crossover with all of the CW DC shows, and clearly they are building towards that. And I might, if I'm not too busy, I might go to Greg and Mark and ask if I can be a part of that, because what is more epic than Crisis on Infinite Earths?
I feel like you should have a role in it, because it's basically like that Arrowverse's Endgame. Like, they've been setting this up for the longest time. Like, it's going to be the conclusion of Arrow. This is where Flash might finally disappear. Supergirl, the Legends, and Batwoman are all going to have a role in it. So I'd be excited to see what you could bring to the table for it, because I'm just excited.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Like Crisis in the comic books came before all of that Thanos stuff that Endgame and Infinity War were based on, and one might even say had a bit of an influence on them.
Absolutely. And
anyway, the next one.
Yes, Case.
Well, of course, the biggest credits that I see on your list are two comic book movies that I very much enjoy that actually came out in the same year, Thor and First Class. And
each other.
Yeah, exactly. And I like both movies a lot. X-Men First Class is actually one of my favorite comic book movies. It's a little crazy that you needed to reboot X-Men after it was essentially dead after Wolverine. I mean, mm-hmm. I know that some people might disagree, but I am not a fan of X-Men Origins. But how was it like to reboot the X-Men franchise, essentially?
I will tell you in 1 second. I'm just greeting my family as they come through the door. Okay. Just wrapping up, babe. But I've got the oven heating. There, the glamorous life of a screenwriter.
Family first.
Anyway, okay. rebooting the X-Men was incredibly fun and incredibly difficult at the same time, because you had to serve both the comic book X-Men universe and, of course, the for lack of a better term, the movieverse that had been running for almost a decade by that point. So you had two sets of continuity that you had to somehow serve, and oh yes, go back and tell your own origin story of how these two iconic characters met. And I will say that we were helped immeasurably by the fact that lightning struck for a second time, and you had two, you had in Fassbender and McAvoy, two actors who were able to inhabit those iconic roles, as well as Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, two of the great actors in the English language. So, when you've got those two saying your lines, you're kind of halfway there already.
And
Very
actually,
true.
speaking of, so a bit of news came out, and the rest of us are going to get into in the second half of the show. But I just want to see if I can get this from you real fast. So it was reported this week that Matthew Vaughn actually had an idea for a second film in between First Class and Days of Future Past, with Tom Hardy playing a younger Wolverine. And then because Fox apparently liked Days of Future Past so much, they kind of scrapped that second film. I'm just curious, were you aware of the existence of that second film, or was that?
Matthew Vaughn, we had a great relationship with Matthew Vaughn until Matthew Vaughn decided that he was going to do things without us, but we still were friends with people within Fox, and we were hearing about what was going on and what he wanted to do, and I think there were a lot of discussions going on, and I think Fox realized that Days of Future Past was going to be the closest thing to an Avengers event that they could get. I think it was just very appealing to them to have, old Professor X and young Professor X in the same movie together. And Wolverine, who's been their bread and butter since 2001, coming back as well, and not just to drop an F-bomb and leave as he did in our movie.
And that's thank you for answering that, because as soon as I came across that story, I'm like, okay, wait, if he's gonna be on the show, I might as well just see. But thank you for answering that. And now Ryan, it's all you.
You spoke a bit about like how 80s movies had an influence here and there. I think throughout all various projects that you've worked on, but a big project coming up for you is Big Trouble in Little China, and I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts just on what it's like to remake like a cult classic 80s film, and also to write for a modern day movie star like The Rock. That's got to be pretty exciting, I feel like.
I'm unfortunately going to have to use past tense here, because we worked on Big Trouble in Little China. It was one of my former partner and I's favorite movies of all time, so it felt it felt almost like blasphemy to be remaking it, but we felt like we had a really cool take on it. We did the script, and of course writing with Dwayne Johnson's voice in your head as Jack Burton was a tremendous amount of fun as well. Frankly, I think what's happened is The Rock's thinking has evolved to a place where he wants it to be less of a remake with him playing Jack Burton and more of a sequel where he would be playing a new character and Kurt Russell would be coming back to play Jack Burton.
Like Jumanji.
That said, The Rock is backed up until 2023 probably.
Yep.
So who knows where, if at all, Big Trouble in Little China would fit in there. I do know that it's one of his favorite movies of all time, so who knows.
Well, I think that's really cool that in that vein of talking about the Amblin movies, and then something much more grown up, I think, in Big Trouble in Little China, to have sort of even the chance at writing something along those lines. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Our big thought for Big Trouble in Little China was that we wanted to make it a tribute to the last 15 or 20 years of Chinese cinema, in the same way that the original Big Trouble in Little China was a tribute to like the Shaw Brothers in the kind of 60s and 70s Hong Kong cinema that John Carpenter loved so much. We wanted to like, have the influences of like, Hero and House of Flying Daggers and all the wuxia films and so forth. But we'll see.
Right. Well, hopefully they can make something out of it.
Hopefully. But before we let you go, just one last thing for you. What's next?
What's next is an animated show for Netflix that I can't announce the title of yet. It is going to drop in 2020.
Okay.
And I'm writing a pilot for Greg Berlanti and Warner Brothers, an original idea. That should be very cool if it goes. It's kind of light science fiction, military, family drama, all rolled into one. And then I'm working on a couple of new features. And chasing an anime project. So many irons in the fire. We'll see which ones of them bear fruit. And wow, that was a tremendously mixed metaphor.
It works.
That works.
Which one of those irons bears fruit?
That works very, very. It works regardless. Just like that little piece of advice you gave me, and thank you. So,
of course.
So, guys, we're gonna take a short break. But before we do, I just want to quickly say, I really hope that when you have your next project coming out, we can have you back on the show, because I'm not gonna lie, I really want to pick your brain about a sci-fi show that I grew up loving, about the adventures of Captain Dylan Hunt and the crew the Andromeda. So,
next, like War Machine said, next time, baby.
Next time, baby, indeed. But yeah, so Zach, thank you so much for your time. And where can the good folks find you online?
Muzak, MUSEZACK, on Instagram and Twitter.
And with that, guys, we will be back in about 5 minutes. Don't go anywhere. That was Zack Stentz. Holy
Thanks,
crap.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.